It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com, coming to you on a Monday, February 17th. Halfway through February, right here from COG Studios. A busy week for the LA Galaxy as they get ready for their last public preseason game. There sounds like there's going to be a closed-door scrimmage on Wednesday as well. So a real busy sort of week as everything gets finalized here. We have rumor updates for you. We're going to talk about the scrimmage, the Galaxy losing 2-1 to Toronto FC. We have that as well. So we have a lot of stuff to get to, a lot of things to talk about. And we're obviously very glad you could join us on what is increasingly becoming a very, very short amount of time for the LA Galaxy. Helping me out on all this, the Panda himself, Mr. Kevin Baxter. Kev, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, I could hear the music that time.
See, I tell you, we try to fix things every single week. We try to get just a little bit better, right? Just like the Galaxy, we have to try to get a little better.
I would have a hard time dancing to that.
Yeah, well, you would have a hard time dancing to anything.
I would. That's right.
That's fine. But Kev, I know it's been a busy week. I know it's been a busy week for you. I know it's been a busy week for a lot of the reporters who are covering it, and obviously the fans. They get out to Dignity Health Sports Park and actually get to watch a game. They get to watch the Galaxy lose 2-1. But I know you were traveling as well. You were all over the place, weren't you?
Yeah, I went up to San Jose on Wednesday and had a chance to spend part of the day with Megan Rapinoe, which was kind of fun. And then flew from San Jose to San Diego, where I spent 2 days with Landon Donovan and his new team, the San Diego Loyal, the USL team that he's going to be coaching this year, and met almost the entire roster, a lot of players. And it was really funny because you see people that you saw in other places that I didn't even realize they were there. Like Raul Mendiola was one who came up to me and we talked for a little while. I didn't even know that he was in San Diego. I mean, a lot of these signings are still happening, especially around a USL. You know, guys wait to see if they're going to be picked up by an MLS team. And by this point, they know if they are or not. So they start going to USL teams, and teams like San Diego Loyal are signing people all the time. But another guy that I talked to down there, who was somebody that I knew from years ago, Carlos Alvarez. And if that name sounds familiar, he was a high school star here in LA, played at Salesian High School, and then went to Connecticut and was drafted with the number 2 pick in the MLS draft in 2013. He was taken by Chivas USA and was given a 4-year contract. And the reason I remember all this is I went to his house in East Los Angeles and met with him and his dad after he was drafted. And I met his little kid brother, who was in grade school at the time. And I remember Carlos telling me that he and his little kid brother were coached by their dad and, learned everything they knew about soccer from their dad. And when I was talking to Carlos over last week, he asked me about his kid brother. You know what? That was Efrain Alvarez. I had no idea.
Yeah, it was one of those small world moments, right?
Well, and it goes on from there. I mean, Carlos had his career was really pretty much destroyed by the collapse of Chivas. He had a 4-year contract. He was traded to Colorado because Chivas was going to fold and the league did not want to pay his salary. He didn't fit in there. He's been bouncing around ever since. But you talk about small world. He married a woman, Renee Cuellar, who is a star with the Xolos Femenil in Liga MX, and also is a stud with the Mexican women's national team. She went to Los Altos High School, which is the rival school of where I went to school out in Hacienda Heights. So there's another kind of small world thing. I mean, like I said, I did this story on Carlos. Obviously, I did not research it very well because it seems like I missed a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was one of those. It's interesting, and Landon Donovan obviously starting that team down in San Diego. So all that is you were telling me something about his ownership too, right? He's one of 3 owners.
Right, one of 3 owners, but only one owner really put in any substantial capital into this. And one of the owners put in reportedly around $10 million. Landon is a part owner, but he is also coach and general manager. And I think probably the ownership stake was one of the things that helped draw him into the team. And then they have another owner who came down who worked with Sacramento Republic and Portland Timbers before, and he came down. He put in several $100,000, but nothing close to $10 million. It looks like it's going to be a good team, though. The community down there is very excited about it. I really had to ask Landon what I thought were some tough questions, though. He retired with the Galaxy, then he came back from retirement, then he retired again and said he wasn't going to play again. Then he wound up in Leon and he didn't play there. Then he came back and he played indoor for the San Diego Sockers. And now he's a coach. And so my questions to him were, why should we believe that this is what you're really going to do? You're going to be here 4 or 5 or 6 months, and then you're going to move on to something else, just like you did with the Galaxy, just like you did with Leon, just like you did with the Sockers. And he said, no, the fact that he's a father now, it's changed the way that he views things. He said he has this new, he's really enjoying the idea of nurturing players and bringing them along. He has a lot more patience. And in his words, he said, I found a new vocation, something I'm really excited about. And he said, I haven't been as excited about something since he first started playing soccer professionally at 15. So we'll see how long he lasts. All the players love his attitude. He has a woman assistant coach, which is a real rarity. And I asked him whether that was part of, the deal to get attention for the team or what that was. And he said, no, I interviewed a lot of people and she was the most, she was the most qualified person for the job. She's a soccer coach first, and she just happens to be a woman. So a lot of good things going on down there. And they opened their first game is against the Las Vegas Lights, which is coached by Eric Wynalda. And see, that's interesting because if you remember, Wynalda scored 34 goals for the national team and was the all-time leading scorer until Landon broke his record. For sure, there's never been a game coached by the two former leading scorers in U.S. national team history. So, and I asked somebody about that. I go, wow, that's really fortunate. What a quirk in the schedule to have this game, be the first game of the USL season. And it's going to be on national TV March 7th, and this will be great. And they said, do you really think that was a coincidence? So, yeah, they jiggered their schedule a little bit to get Eric Wynalda to bring Las Vegas to San Diego for that first game.
Yeah, it seems like an interesting matchup and sort of an interesting story to follow Landon. And one of the things we really wanted to talk about was the live show coming up on February 22nd. That's right. We've told you many times before, 2:22 at 2 p.m. All of that basically stays the same. What we want to do is just shift that just about 15 minutes earlier. So think 2:22 at 2 p.m., but then think 1:45 p.m. so that way we can get everybody there. What's going to happen is, what we understand is that about 11 o'clock, the doors will open at Dignity Health Sports Park. We know that there then is a game that kicks off, I believe, between Toronto and the Colorado Rapids, and that happens at 12 p.m. And then from 12 p.m., what we get is basically that game going on. So at 1 o'clock, we're going to start showing up to the stage. And I should mention, on the KINECTA PLAZA, at the stage. So basically, if you go to the concourse and you walk all the way towards the back, the far southeast corner, there's a stage on the back of one of the restaurants there, and they call that the KINECTA PLAZA. All right, and so that stage is where we're going to be set up, and if that changes, we'll let you know, but that's what you want to do and what you want to find. The live show starts at 1:45, so you're going to want to be there by then, but we're also going to do a COG meet and greet starting at about 1, where you can meet select COG members, basically anybody who's available that early and can be there. So at 1 p.m. you can start that, and then our live show should start around 1:45, 1:50, and we'll take you all the way up to about 2:45 when the live show ends and the LA Galaxy kick off against the Chicago Fire at 3 p.m.
You want me there about 2:50 then?
Yeah, I was going to say 3:15 works. No,
Yeah.
No. I mean, listen. Lots of people have talked about getting a chance to meet everybody and say hi. So it'll be a little bit of a meetup before we even record, Kevin, which I think works pretty well. But I don't know about you. I walked this. I saw where it is, and I think it's pretty much the perfect spot for everybody to sort of join us there and be part of the show. So I'm looking forward to that.
I don't know about perfect. I mean, you can't see the field from there,
yes.
And there doesn't appear to be any beer within close proximity.
Approximately like 4 steps behind the stage is where the beer is. Like, I don't know if we could be any closer to the beer without the beer actually being on us.
So 4 whole steps.
Yes. It won't be far. So there's some picnic tables and some shade and stuff like that. So hopefully we can see everybody coming over there. But we really wanted to take this moment and say, please come, please show up. Your support means a ton, but we'd really love to have your interaction there. We are planning to have some special guests, and a lot of that depends on sort of who's available the day of. So it's not even something I can tease. But
I can tease it.
Yeah, who are you going to tease?
Well, there could be some Galaxy front office personnel.
I would expect that that's probably the most possible one to show up as the Galaxy front office personnel. But if you really want to tease, there's a possibility of getting some Galaxy players as well. It kind of depends on who's not playing in the game that will kick off about 15 minutes after we're done.
Yeah, it has to be guys who aren't in uniform.
So, hey, listen, we'll make our request. We'll see what happens. But we want everybody there, certainly, so that way you can show up and have some fun with us. Again, the last preseason game for the LA Galaxy, which means something. You're going to get to see basically the team that will take on Houston, maybe not. We'll check all that stuff.
Well, if injured players talking to us, they're not going to probably take on. Well, they might take on Houston.
You never know. You can never tell. But anyway, so that's what we have. Well, let's get to Kevin. Let's get to the recap. Let's talk about the scrimmage. Talk about the Galaxy's 2-1 loss to Toronto FC. A preseason game that saw a red card and one team play short a man for just shy of 2/3 of the game. So I don't know how much we can really take from this. Even Guillermo Barros-Schelotto in the press conference afterwards was sort of like, you don't really want to see what it's like to play 10v11. You'd like to see 11v11, but having said that, he thought that they played better 10v11 than they did 11v11.
Well, I mean, there's a couple ways to look at it. First of all, Greg Vanney, Toronto coach, we were told afterwards that if it's a gated game, which it was, meaning played in a stadium where people had to pay to get in, that all the rules apply. In other words, just a red card is a red card, you're expelled, those kind of things. Apparently, there was unlimited substitutions,
yes,
right? So what rules do you accept and which rules don't you accept? I mean, I think if Toronto had pushed it, they might have been able to get the officials to agree. I don't know if they would have been able to, but I don't understand what Toronto got out of that by playing with 10 men. I mean, or playing 11 men against 10. It doesn't help them at all because now they're out of their regular formation. They're playing a different kind of soccer. They're pushing for a goal rather than playing a full game. I thought the Galaxy actually got a lot more out of it, and the reason I say that is because at some point during the season they're going to go down to 10 men. It's going to happen, and I know that Guillermo wasn't happy about it, and he didn't really want to practice that in the preseason, but he got a chance to do it, and his players got a chance to do it, and I think they looked really comfortable doing it. And so when that happens during the regular season, I don't think they're going to panic. I think they should feel very, very confident that they can play that way. They gave up a goal at the very end of stoppage time. Not really a sloppy goal, but not a great goal. I mean, I think it was one they probably should have stopped. And then they gave up a goal on a penalty kick. So essentially they gave up one sloppy goal, like you said, with about 58 minutes down a man. I think they should take a lot of confidence from that game.
Yeah, it seems that is sort of the route that everybody's gonna focus on. I'll tell you, the red card in my mind, and I've seen people argue about this all over again, there's no stomp by Katai. This is Laurent Simon came in and sort of slid underneath Katai. Katai just stepped where he thought the ball was going to be. It turned out Simon was there, and he stepped on his leg. Yeah, it probably didn't feel great. Could it have been a yellow card? Sure. But there certainly wasn't anything reckless or an intent to endanger anybody in that play. And so this is where you have to sit there and question the referee's motives in a game like this. In a game like this, you know that you're trying to, that this is just a preseason warm-up, that everybody's trying to iron out the kinks. So as a referee, you need to understand that if you give a red card, you've ruined this entire event for both of those teams. I mean, you can say the Galaxy took something out of it, Kevin, which you're right, but you know what the Galaxy didn't get any of was their 3-star offensive players who all plan on being very important, integral parts of this Galaxy offense playing together, because that didn't happen. So, whatever MLS needs to do, whatever anybody wants to sort of try to figure out, it needs to be better than this. If this is a preseason scrimmage, as it is, you need to understand, I don't care if you take Katai off. I mean, you can. First of all, VAR was in use, and so they actually took a look at this on VAR, and they let it stand. I mean, if you're the VAR official, you even get a chance to help the referee out and be like, dude, it's a preseason game. Just give him a yellow card and say, don't do that again. And Simon wasn't angry at Katai, and Katai wasn't acting like he tried to hurt Simon. They went and they shook hands, and everybody was just sort of standing around. The only person who seemed upset about it was the referee, who then had to deal with Chicharito and Sasha Kleshkin coming in and sort of saying, hey, guys, what was the deal here? It was a wasted opportunity for me for a preseason game. It's a wasted opportunity for people who actually spent the money to come out to a preseason game and watch it. And you don't want to see, a 10v11 game. Not in the preseason, not whenever you want to see how a team is coming together.
Now, Galaxy 2 played on Saturday as well, correct?
No, not before. It was the other two teams. It was Toronto. It wasn't Toronto. It was Colorado and Chicago. Fire played before that.
Okay, but out on the track stadium, there wasn't a Galaxy 2 game?
Yeah, I'd have no idea. Couldn't tell you.
I was because it's interesting you talk about the officials, and I'm not going to pass judgment on whether they were good or bad because in any case, these officials were not part of that decision. It was the center referee, but there were 3 siblings that worked that game. Felicia Marscal, who is from Chula Vista, she's part of a family of officials. She actually worked games at the Women's World Cup in France this last summer. She and her brothers Eduardo and Alejandro were all referees in this Galaxy game. Felicia worked one side as an assistant referee. Eduardo worked the other side. Alejandro was one of the VAR officials, and when I met with them afterwards, they told me that their other brother, who was also an official, also worked the game. And I thought they said that he worked the Galaxy 2 game, which is why I was asking. But you're right, he may have worked that Chicago game. I hope they all carpooled up from Chula Vista together.
It would make sense if you're all a family and doing that. I've seen them, and we've seen them officiate games before. Whether I think it's been preseason or some maybe U.S. Open Cup games or something like that. They're local, semi-local. Let's put it that way. They're semi-local. And so you see them a lot in the preseason. And I have nothing. It just, to me, it's not worth putting the whole thing together if you're going to play this game 10v11. Despite the fact that I think the LA Galaxy actually played pretty well. You said it. Guillermo said it. Some of the players said it as well. So that's fine. Let me give you the lineup real quick as I remember it because I just remembered that I forgot to sort of put it here. But Kevin, you can correct me whenever I'm wrong, I'm sure. Starting at goalkeeper was David Bingham. At right back was Julian Araujo. Now, Araujo was playing in place of what we thought was the injured Rolf Feltscher, and we'll talk about Rolf Feltscher here in a little bit and why he's not in the country.
Injured.
Yeah.
Injured.
Maybe not injured. Maybe just, anyway, we'll tell you about it. I don't want to skip around, but he was playing in place of Rolf Feltscher. You had Nick DePuy playing in place of Daniel Steres. Daniel Steres apparently has an injury of some sort. Guillermo expected him to be back this week, and he said he expected both Rolf and Steres to be available for the next preseason game. That sort of depends on their recovery and how it goes. All right. Next to Nick DePuy, who we're going to talk a whole bunch about, I'm sure, was Pipo Gonzalez. So Pipo Gonzalez there. And then out at left back started was Danilo Acosta. Dani Acosta was out there at left back, and he certainly had an up-and-down game and left injured, and we could talk about that as well. In the midfield, you had Sebastian Lletget, Sasha Kleshin, and Joe Corona. And then if you look at sort of the 4-3-3, the top 3, it was Cristian Pavon, Chicharito, so Javier Hernandez gets his debut, and on the right side was Aleksandar Katai. That's how the LA Galaxy started. That's how they played most of the game until about the 70th plus minute, right around the 78th minute, actually. It felt like it was even later than that, about 78 minutes, where it looked like there was a big line change and sort of people went around and sort of did some different things.
And that's what Guillermo said afterwards, that his plan for his starters, especially Chicharito, was about 70 to 75 minutes, which is about where they should be at this point of this preseason.
Yeah, it makes sense. Again, we saw 60 minutes in the closed door scrimmage that was streamed. So you would expect 70 to 75 minutes, which means that next week you should expect starters to go the full 90 minutes. So that's something that you want to watch and sort of keep an eye on. So yeah, that's what we saw. So I mean, let's start with some of the talking points here, Kevin. I think the first one and the biggest one is Javier Hernandez and Chicharito getting his big debut in front of the LA Galaxy, sort of this preseason.
Wearing the armband.
Wearing the captain. So there were a lot of people who were upset about that, Kevin.
Well, who would you would have given it to? I mean, Jonathan's going to have it when the season starts.
Right.
But in that lineup, I think he's the best choice.
Well, I mean, listen, I think we even prognosticated this particular point, is that we thought that Javier was going to be a vice captain of some sort. We figured,
he said that after the game that he was.
Yeah, and
he
so
confirmed that.
And so you would expect that he would be. I would expect guys like Sebastian Lletget to be a vice captain. I would expect guys like Dan Steres to be a vice captain as well. I would expect these guys to take the armband whenever Jonathan Dos Santos doesn't have it. But you're also talking about Jonathan Dos Santos, who plays 90 minutes almost every single game. This probably isn't a thing. So I had zero issues with Javier Hernandez wearing an armband.
The only other starter maybe that I would have given it to might have been Sasha. I understand that, yeah, Sebastian and then Bingham, he's a veteran, but he's a goalie. He's not out there in the middle of the field. What you want, first of all, whoever you pick has to have the language proficiency, meaning if you have a referee who speaks English or Spanish, the captain has to be able to talk to him. And Javier is bilingual, so that's perfect. But then he also has the gravitas, he has the status to go up to an official. Not that some of these other guys don't, but I think when the leading goal scorer in the history of the Mexican national team comes up to a referee, I think maybe that referee gives him a few more minutes and gives him a little bit more leeway to argue his point than he might somebody who doesn't have that status. I think Sasha probably has that status. Javier certainly does. Sebastian, maybe. I'm not that totally convinced because he hasn't had the career those other two guys have. He will at some point. So I had no problem with it. I thought it was a good decision, and it's a guy you're paying a ton of money, and he's the face of the franchise. Why wouldn't you want him wearing the armband?
I mean, there's certainly, and you can point to history showing that there was an uproar whenever David Beckham joined the David Beckham joined the LA Galaxy and got the armband. I think this is a reaction still to that. But it seems like it's a totally different. Jonathan Dos Santos is going to be the captain. That has been all but confirmed this year. I don't think Jonathan said it, and I don't know that Guillermo said it, but we basically, everybody has already understood that to be the case. So Jonathan Dos Santos is going to be the LA Galaxy captain this year. As far as vice captains go, that's fine. Javier Hernandez can wear it, and I think I'm fine with that. Kevin, he has a lot of gravitas. Again, the only other person that I would probably lean to in this particular situation is Sebastian Lletget. Also has that bilingual sort of feel to it, and I would say that Chicharito and Sebastian can arm wrestle for it. It really doesn't matter to me as far as that goes. So anyway, so Chicharito gets that. He doesn't score a goal, Kevin. He is a little, I would say that I think Larry was keeping track, and he didn't touch the ball until 7 minutes into the game. He certainly had a slow burn to getting involved, but he did have some good chances, some chances that you'd probably expect him to make if this wasn't preseason and he wasn't just sort of getting used to his team. For me, it was a perfectly adequate debut, and if he would have scored, it would have been perfect, and you could have said, hey, that guy gets a 9 out of 10 on the rating, but it didn't happen. So I think you look at him as sort of a good. It was a good start. He didn't get to combine outside of the first 33 minutes with Katai, which they did have a great combo on, and Katai should have scored, and then he was sent off a couple minutes later whenever Pavon and Katai switched sides. By the way, I thought about this because right before Katai got sent off, Cristian Pavon looked at him and said, hey, let's switch sides. And they were like, okay, so if Pavon doesn't say that, Katai probably stays on the field, right? So
yeah, he was on the wrong side. And another thing with Javier is I thought he tracked back pretty well on defense. He didn't go across the midfield stripe, but he put in a lot of miles, lost a shoe, was running all over the place, and did a pretty good job of harassing defenders and the Toronto goalkeeper when they were trying to start to play the ball out of the back end. And that's something we didn't see a lot last year. I thought he really hustled. We'll see if it was just a sort of, attempt to show off a little bit in the first game, or if that's something that he does. But in the past, he's tended to put in a lot of miles in a game. So I think we're going to see a lot of running from him, even at 31.
Yeah, I thought the work rate was great. I thought some of his off-the-ball running was great. The one real good chance he had was a pass from Pavon, and it was the understanding that Javier was on the back shoulder of a player and that he was going to cut to the front shoulder, and it was that back and forth, Kevin, that sort of unnerved that defender and made Javier be able to catch that ball with his left foot and then a little bit off balance the shot. There was some great saves by Quentin Westberg as well from Toronto. So, you look at the other side, David Bingham had some good saves as well. But for me, like I said, Chicharito, his debut, perfectly adequate, no problems with that. He doesn't get injured. He gets the time that he needed. And so I don't think you can, again, outside of scoring, that's really the only thing that I would really expect to change. And the Galaxy playing down a man for most of that, Chicharito's role is going to be limited in terms of how they play. So that's just one of those things that when you go down a man, the forward is going to have those problems.
Well, another thing I saw from him too, and I'll go back to my controversial prediction that I still see him as with between 12 and 15 goals, but the team being much better with him because of that work rate that you talked about. But another thing that I noticed, I don't know if you picked up on this, some of those runs he was taking two defenders with him and was leaving space open, and the Galaxy didn't take advantage of that to the extent that they're going to need to during the regular season. But if everybody is going to double team Chicharito, when he starts to take those runs, if it's going to upset the defense, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for other players. And I see Pavon scoring a lot of goals. I see Katai scoring a lot of goals. I see a lot more goals coming from the midfield. Remember, last year was Zlatan scoring 30 goals. There was only one other player that scored more than 3 goals. And Tuna's no longer here. So I think you're going to get a lot more production throughout the lineup this year. And part of it's because Javier is going to take a lot of the attention of the opposing defenses, opening things up for everybody else.
Yeah, certainly. And you talk about Cristian Pavon and goals. We have to talk about Cristian Pavon's probably the goal of the year gets wasted in preseason, as we were joking about many times. Cristian Pavon picked up the ball inside his own half, dribbled past 4 players, broke 3 tackles, went from the left middle of the field to the right side, and then launched a right-footed shot after his, 50-yard run that he made. Just a little shy of that. Launched a shot from outside the box, probably about 25 yards, and beat Westberg over the top. It was a sort of, again, I think somebody got it right on one of the social media sites and said, if you saw this in the EPL, you would be sitting there, oh, what a great goal, what a great player that is. And because it's MLS, everybody's saying, oh, well, the defense was horrible. This was a designated player for the LA Galaxy, Cristian Pavon, doing what designated players are supposed to do, which is hoist this team on his back and score goals, especially after the red card to Katai, not too long before that. So this is a guy who is looking to make a difference this year, Kevin. This Cristian Pavon is going to have to shoulder a lot more of the load than he did in his 11 games that he had last year. And he was still outstanding in those 11 games with, I think, 3 goals and 8 assists. So he played really well, but he's going to be a goal scorer this year, and I think the movement between him, Katai, and Chicharito is going to be something that's going to unnerve any defense in Major League Soccer, but that doesn't mean that great players aren't playing, and I think the Galaxy have a front 3 that is going to scare a lot of people.
Well, if you're going to put if you're going to put Pavon down and say, oh, that wasn't a EPL-worthy goal. Remember, this guy is an Argentine World Cup player. He's a player that a lot of clubs in the EPL were interested in and probably still are interested in. I mean, he's a very young player. Let's he's probably going to wind up in Europe at some point if he keeps playing like that. One thing I thought about the goal, though, is he had made such a long run and expended so much energy, as you said, avoiding those tackles, getting around those defenders. He was well outside the box when he shot, and it was a perfect shot. It went up and over the goalkeeper and then just under the bar. It was a perfect shot. But I kind of got the impression that the shot was like, I am exhausted. I don't have the touch to lay this ball off. When a lot of times after a run like that, to pull up and make a soft pass and hit somebody in stride, it's almost impossible. I kind of felt like the idea was, I'm at the end of this run. I've got to get rid of this ball, and I can't lay it off to anybody because it's just going to go beyond the end line. And so he struck it, and perfect touch.
Yeah,
it's one of the best goals I've seen in person, by the way.
Yeah, it was, and that's, I don't think that's to diminish any of the skill in that. I mean, he's running out of real estate in that direction that he was running. There are people who are going to close him down. There are sorts of things. The thing that really happened here is Toronto laid off just a little bit enough, and I think that's what Pavon is going to thrive at right now. I think that's really what you're going to see him do, is exploit the space that he's given, and whether that's passing or whether that is finishing goals. I think that's really the important part of Cristian Pavon. And I think it's interesting that, you look at somebody like Guillermo Barros-Schelotto playing with 2 inverted wingers, and inverted in the sense that you have a right-footed, Pavon that plays on the left side, and a guy in Katai who can hit left-footed playing on the right side, and the fact that they invert into the formation, so inside. So their runs on most occasions are going to be from outside in, and those runs going outside in move them towards the player that they just spent a whole bunch of money on, which is Chicharito. The movement of that, and the ability to switch sides, and the ability to not have a rooted spot. Chicharito is going to patrol just at the top of that box, and he's going to want the center of the field, but he knows how to open up space. So if he runs to the near post, expect somebody like Pavon to run in behind him. Expect somebody like Katai to run in behind him and run into that space. And I think you saw just a little bit of that. Again, being a smart striker, you go back to guys like Robbie Keane, who knew how to run when he needed to run, which was, pulling players away from the ball. So that way there's space open for the ball. for the guy who has the ball. I mean, even in the Pavon case, Chicharito is moving counter to Pavon. So Chicharito's moving right to left as Pavon is moving left to right, and that's what you want to see. You want to see that rotation, and that rotation, especially with three players, is hard to mark. I really think that there's going to be there's people predicting right now, and I've been watching it, and I've sort of been saying, okay, we'll see. You talk about Chicharito's goals, Kevin, in terms of how many goals you think, 12 to 15. Sure, that could be good. But what you might not expect is that you might get, 15 to 20. I think it's higher. I actually think 15 to 20 is probably Chicharito's ceiling on there. We're not too far off on the 15, so we say 15. But 15 to 20 for Chicharito. If you can get 15 from Katai and 15 from Pavon, all of a sudden you're playing with fire. And in fact, I think they can score a lot more goals than that whenever you add in, a 3 or a 4 from somebody like Kleshin or Leggett. So I don't think this Galaxy team is going to suffer on offense. And I think that's one of the biggest sort of takeaways that we saw from this scrimmage is that they're going to have the chance to score a lot of goals. And it looks like they have the creativity to do that.
Okay, but stopping goals is the problem. And one of the things Dennis has talked about, and Guillermo too, is you don't always just play defense with your defenders. It's a team game. You play team defense. And one of the things that they're talking about is the formation and the way the formation works. And so let's go back to what you were just talking about. We know Chicharito's a poacher. We know that he spends a lot of his time in the box. He scores from inside the box. So if you're an opposing defense, you're going to have some people, and we talked about they were double teaming him, Toronto was. You're going to have a couple people, maybe your two center backs, maybe a center back and an outside back, following Chicharito around inside the box, so playing very deep. Okay, well, Pavon likes to score from distance, and by distance I don't mean from 40 yards out, that's Zlatan range, but I mean just outside the box. So you have Chicharito in the box, you have Pavon dangerous from just outside the box. You've already put 2 defenders on Chicharito. You got to put somebody on Pavon. You can't just leave him out there on his own. So now all of a sudden opponents have to drop their midfielders back. All of a sudden they got 6-7 people right at inside the box or at the top of the box. That's going to limit what they can do offensively, and I think that is part of the game plan. That more players the opposition has to use in defense to guard against Pavon at the top of the box and Chicharito in the box, and then we forget about Katai and Leggett and even Jonathan Dos Santos lurking around there. The more that the opposing teams have to drop those players back to defend, the fewer players they have going forward, and that's going to make your defense that much better because there's fewer opportunities for the other team to break out and get the ball going the other way.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Now let's flip it. Let's talk about the defense now. We talked about the offense. I'll tell you right now, the midfield left me wanting with Sasha Kleshin in there and Sebastian Leggett. I mean, Leggett gets a somewhat passable grade. I would like to see more from Sasha Kleshin, understanding that he's replacing Jonathan Dos Santos, understanding that those guys haven't worked together that much, so you want to see some progression in the midfield. I wasn't ecstatic about that. But the guy who I was ecstatic about because he was fun to watch, 6'5", Nick DePuy. And by the way, it is DePuy. That is how you say his last name. We were officially told what it is. So Nick DePuy out there, 6'5", coming up from LA Galaxy 2, a guy who was his sole task for most of that game, Kevin, was marking Jozy Altidore, one of the top American strikers in the game right now. And granted, it's preseason Jozy Altidore. I'm not going to pretend like this was a mid-season game or a playoff game. But whenever you have a 25-year-old like Nick DePuy coming out there and having to mark against somebody like Jozy Altidore, you're asking them to do a lot of work. And DePuy was more than up to that task, I think. He was a revelation. He was fun to watch. He was big. He was physical. He was certainly manning and putting his body on Jozy Altidore. There wasn't a lot of space given up. He was good at stepping forward and making the right decision. I think they got caught once, which was the goal at the end of the first half that sort of saw Araujo and DePuy sort of get caught up inside the box, and it wasn't great. And we have to point out that the Galaxy could have been down a couple goals early in this game because the defense wasn't great. They were getting Toronto was getting around the edges and getting balls back behind. Defenders were forced to face David Bingham, and David Bingham had a very good game, a very solid game. As a matter of fact, if David Bingham has this type of game in this season, I think that he'll be more than serviceable for the Galaxy this year.
I thought David Bingham had a really good game, and I did like Depew, and I thought the thing I liked about him is he wasn't intimidated. He didn't look like a guy who had just been called up from Galaxy 2 to play in MLS. He certainly didn't look like he was worried about going against Josie Altidore.
Right.
I liked the way he played. I liked his communication with his teammates. Again, I liked the aggressiveness, and I think back to a guy who maybe has a little bit of a different profile. But if you remember back into the Bruce Arena years when they drafted a defender named Tommy Meyer, and they thought that he was going to be a really good player, a big physical guy as well. And I distinctly remember a game in San Jose where Alan Gordon and some other players on the Earthquakes were really eating him up because he wasn't getting physical. And at one point, Omar Gonzalez just literally pushed him in the back and just said, go out there and play. He just felt like he believed he didn't belong on that field, and I didn't get that at all from Nick. He definitely looked like he belonged and was trying to prove a point. And we'll talk about this in a minute. The Galaxy is still looking for some center back depth, but if just based on one game, I know it's very small sample size, but
right.
If he continues to play like this might be the guy they were looking for.
Yeah.
He's going to compete for some starting time if he continues to play like that.
Certainly depth, and I think if you want to if you don't want to overreact to it, which again I'm sort of with you, Kevin. I kind of want to overreact. Why couldn't he be a starter? One of those things. But if we don't want to overreact, you can say the Galaxy now have depth at that position. Even if they add another center back, this is a good kid in a good position that can really help the LA Galaxy on defense if and when there are injuries, in that defensive core. The other kid who was out there, and we talk about kids, Julian Araujo out on the right back, getting the start. We told you about that. I thought he was playing with a confidence level we did not see last year. I said he was playing with like the international sort of thinking going on. So the international game technically should be faster, should be quicker. And whenever guys go and play for national teams or even in training, they come back and I always feel like their speed increases. Maybe that's me putting something on those guys, but the speed of thought increases. And I thought Julian Araujo and his speed of thought and his ability to make decisions and his ability to find holes and be in places and be part of the attack and also, not be worried about going forward and coming back, picking the right times to do that. I thought Araujo was very, very good on the day. Certainly there's some stuff on the defensive side you could nitpick that they did score a goal, so you could look at that. But all of those things for me, Julian Araujo checked off as Kevin. This is another guy who if he continues the way that he is right now, could very well be pushing Rolf Feltscher to the bench.
Yeah, a lot of confidence for him too. And Jason Kreis, who's the coach of the U.S. U23 team, which is the Olympic qualifying team. The Olympic qualifying tournament is in March in Guadalajara. That's a team that Julian Araujo wants to play for. Jason Kreis was in attendance, was in the Galaxy box with Dennis DeClosa and Jovan Kurowski and Chris Klein watching the game. And looking at the rosters of those two teams, I think Julian Araujo was one guy that he definitely came to see. So maybe Julian did himself some service by playing so well. But when you talk about his speed, one thing I wanted to point out is the speed of thought definitely has changed, and he does have a lot more confidence. There were some things that happened to him last summer, being left off the U20 team for the U20 World Cup, then being added to the team and sent to Poland, and then not playing. His mom has told me that really bothered him, and there was sort of a renewed dedication to getting this right and to not letting the situation pass and these opportunities pass. So I think he does sort of have new dedication or new goals, I guess is the best thing to say. There's some more things that he wants to accomplish. He is certainly, and this is great too. I mean, here's a kid as a teenager, he's playing for the LA Galaxy and he's playing for youth national teams. But he's not satisfied with that. He wants to get better, and you can see that. But when you talk about the speed of thought and what you think that perhaps is speed of foot too, Christy Rampone, when she played with the U.S. women's national team, when she was getting very old, she was, I think, 38 at the time we had this conversation. I told her, man, you are really fast for a 38-year-old. And she said, no, actually, I'm not. But what happens is, the more you play and the more confident you get, the more you learn about positioning. And so all of a sudden, instead of having to make a 30-yard run or a 35-yard run, you're only making a 15 or 20-yard run because you're in the right position. Therefore, you look like you're going a lot faster because you don't have to go that far. If you kind of follow that, the fatigue doesn't play a part in that because you're making short runs instead of longer runs. And I think maybe Julian learned a little bit of that too. He's finding the position to be in so that when he does have to run, it's a short spurt and he looks very fast as opposed to a long long looping stride when he's trying to catch somebody from behind.
Yeah, I thought one of the sort of downsides to him and his quickness was that he actually got in the way of what I thought was going to be a sure goal as a cutback. Chicharito actually went in and tried to cut the ball back, and here comes Araujo through this spot, which he was. I think it's the right spot because I think he had opened space by making the run, but it was just unfortunate timing, and he actually cut the ball out from its intended, who I think maybe was Pavon, who was creeping into the top of the box, or Leggett, who was creeping at the top of the box. So, all things. So, I mean...
But that's something he'll learn, because one thing with wingers who are aggressive, like he is, and even center backs that push forward, when you push up, you bring a defender with you. So... If he thought he was in position to help offensively, he had a defender with him, which actually detracts from the offense. And when you got guys like Chicharito and Pavon up there, the thing you want to do is give them space to operate. And I know the play you're talking about, and I'm not sure that this is necessarily relevant to that, but that's something that Araujo is going to learn, is if you push in and you bring that defender with you, are you in position to help the offense, or are you just clogging up the box a little bit? And that's one of these things that he's going to learn as well.
Yeah, it was all, again, so, I mean, you sort of look at this game and say, how do you judge it? I think you look at, David Bingham's goalkeeper kit and say, it looked pretty sexy.
Like Barney. He was Barney.
He was Barney. What were some of the other ones? The Joker. It was purple and green, but it was like, what is that, a neon purple? Do you call that neon purple? It kind of feels like it.
I called it ugly purple, actually.
Man, I liked it. I think a lot of people were either you didn't like it and you called it Barney, or you did like it and you called it Joker, or something else. But anyway, I thought that was good. But like that, I think the Galaxy had a perfectly good preseason scrimmage, as good as you can get whenever you're not playing 11v11 for 90 minutes. So, hey, I think those are all steps forward. So, I mean, what do you look for in this next week on Saturday? You look for the steps forward in all those areas where you didn't succeed. And I think, Javier Hernandez came into the press conference afterwards, Kevin, and, the most positive guy, it's hysterical because he's the most positive guy I think I've ever heard. It was just positive out of him, and talking about how he was going to get better, how they did a lot of good things, and they were pretty happy with that, but they had a lot of things to work on. I mean, it's a lot of players speak, but he speaks it with a passion.
Well, what I'm looking for next week is to see some of these pairings. Okay, I don't believe Jonathan's going to play. I think he's doubtful for the opener as well. So that's not really a concern. If he doesn't play in the last preseason game and doesn't play in the opener, that's a wash. Whoever plays in those two, whoever plays on Saturday in his place will probably start in the opener, so that's good. But, I mean, if you're going to have people in Steris, if those are your starting center backs, I want to see that combination on the field. If Feltscher is your starting outside back instead of Araujo, I want to see him on the field. This is the last dress rehearsal, and there's still some chemistry things, especially those defensive pairings and the communication that need to get right. And if Feltscher's not going to be back, or if Steris isn't healthy, then I think you really may have to start thinking about, well, whoever we play in this last preseason game, especially if that was the combination they used against Toronto, maybe that's the combination you take going forward, because you don't want to have any opening day jitters and guys still trying to figure out, runs. There's a lot of new players in the field, and Chicharito being the focus of a lot of it. Pavon only played, 11 games last season. He's new. Right. So there's a lot of this stuff that needs to be figured out, and this is the last time to get that right.
Yeah, you were mentioning Rolf Feltscher, so let's talk about why Rolf Feltscher is in Naples, Italy.
He likes the food.
I was going to say he's a big fan of pizza. He digs it. He wanted the credit card miles. Was another reason. So I was initially told, because Feltscher posted an Instagram post that said, "I'm in Naples, Italy," and then everybody's like, "Why is Feltscher in Italy?" Especially whenever I guess he was either injured and he still could be injured in Italy. I guess that could be a thing that still happens, but I don't think that's the case. But Rolf Feltscher is in Naples, Italy. I was told that it was a visa issue, so I assumed it was him working on a P1 visa for whatever reason. You have to go out of the country and you have to come back, and we talked a whole bunch about that with Javier Hernandez last week, Kevin, in terms of just the hoops you have to jump through and not always going to the place that is the closest, is the place that is fastest. And I also think somebody said that they thought maybe Rolf did have a connection to Italy in terms of a passport or possibly some relatives that live there. I don't know that whole thing, because we know he's Swiss born and has Venezuelan roots, right? So I think his dad was Venezuelan, which is why he plays for the Venezuelan national team. So Rolf Feltscher is in Naples, Italy. So like I said, I was told it was a visa issue. I was then updated and said it could also be a green card. And this is something I think you and I and anybody else who has been talking on the show have really been harping on, is why are the LA Galaxy not getting green cards for some of these guys? And the number one prime example would be Jonathan Dos Santos. Why does Jonathan Dos Santos not have a green card right now, eliminating him from taking up an international slot? But if Rolf Feltscher is indeed getting a green card, which seems to be indicated right now, his value, he makes $242,000 a year, which I think is a reasonable amount of money. His value shoots way up as a domestic player and not an international player. It makes a whole big difference to the LA Galaxy and how they construct a roster whenever you count Feltscher as domestic, and you don't have to worry about he's one of the 8 slots. And as we've talked about many times, currently right now with Feltscher as one of them, the LA Galaxy have 8 of 8 international slots taken up, and you can go out and buy more if you want to, but those are getting increasingly more and more expensive. So Rolf Feltscher getting a green card would be a big roster move for the LA Galaxy this offseason. That sort of can't be understated on that.
Well, and we're going to talk in a minute about Alan Franco, who would need an international slot if he came in. We got Didi Traore down right still with Galaxy 2. He might get called up at any time or be needed for depth. So they do need to solve that problem. And you're right about Jonathan. Here's a guy who has said repeatedly, I want to finish my career with the LA Galaxy. Well, guess what, Jonathan? The LA Galaxy plays in the United States. Why don't you get a green card if you're not going anywhere? And, you know, post-playing career, I mean, you have the right to stay in the United States legally and work here and do all kinds of things that you can't do without a green card. I mean, that's worth its weight in gold as well. So I don't see any reason not to do it for him. As far as the visa thing goes, I remember last year, there are all kinds of different kinds of visas and passports that these guys have. If you're in Italy, I think a couple of players over the last few years have come to the Galaxy from Italy or had Italian passports for some reason. And there is a different status that some of those go through. You have Euro passports. Then you have a lot of these guys with South American passports. What I was told by one of the administrative people with the Galaxy is a lot of times, as you said, it's not the closest place. It's not like send Javier Hernandez down to Tijuana and take care of it there. It's where you can get an appointment, the type of visa that you have or the type of passport that you have and the type of visa you're looking for. Only certain places do those. I'd say all that to tell you that last year Diego Polenta had to go to Canada and actually stay in Vancouver for a couple of days because that was the U.S. Embassy outside of the U.S. where they had appointments, where they handled the type of documentation that he needed to get done. So it had nothing. He had absolutely no ties to Canada whatsoever. But that office in Canada could handle what he needed to get done. And so whatever is going on with Rolf, if indeed he's taking care of immigration issues, they decided that the U.S. consulate or embassy in Italy was the best place, in Naples was the best place for him to go to do that.
Yeah, which is kind of funny. Hey, it's a world game. That's how it works. So anyway, we'll update you on that if we get any word one way or the other. All right, this one is all Kevin. And certainly we got. Yeah, I know.
It's not good.
No, it is because you have the information. We talked about this. This is one of those things I immediately started getting DMs about as soon as there was sort of any hints of this happening. Now that some people may know this name, some people may not know this name, but Kobe Hernandez Foster is a 17.
He wears number 24 on his back and number 8 on his front, by the way.
Mm-hmm. So that makes some sense. He is a 17-year-old standout with the LA Galaxy Academy. This is a guy who has been highly touted most of his career as, one of the next big up-and-coming LA Galaxy players. That goes along with, Mendez and Yanez and a bunch of other guys who have sort of been talked about, Araujo and Efrain Alvarez. All these guys have sort of been mentioned in this same sort of group of standouts that are coming through. And so Kobe Hernandez Foster, whenever the rumors sort of came out that he was going to Wolfsburg in Germany, I started getting text messages saying, hey, the Galaxy missed on another player. I think the answer is yes, but also there's some caveats in that. So, Kevin, I know you talked to some people and figured some of this stuff out, right?
No, actually, he wears number 54 for Galaxy 2. But yes, I did. He has 23 caps with the U.S. U17 national team, played in the World Cup last year in Brazil, made his debut for Galaxy 2 when he was just 16. But what had happened is he told, apparently, remember Wolfsburg pops up. That name all of a sudden gets your attention because that's where Yuli Yanez wound up. He's playing for the U19s there, and he just scored his first goal for the U.S. national team last month in that friendly at actually February 1st, the friendly at Dignity Health Sports Park. But to talk about Kobe Hernandez Foster, he came to the Galaxy and to Dennis DeClosa during the summer and said, look, I want to explore opportunities somewhere else. They parted ways and they have a very good relationship. Dennis said there was no hard feelings, that Kobe told them that he and his family and his agent wanted to explore possibilities in Germany. It was with Wolfsburg. And Dennis said that they actually have a very good relationship with Wolfsburg, and that losing Kobe Hernandez Foster is not necessarily just a one-way street. He could always come back. But that if it succeeds in Wolfsburg, even at the youth level, there are some contractual stipulations that the Galaxy will benefit, whether it's money, players. I don't know exactly what it is. Dennis wouldn't go into detail. In fact, he said, I cannot go into detail. But he says, I'll tell you that if he makes an impact there, it will be very beneficial to the Galaxy. They're very happy with that, and they wish him all the best. That to me also suggests that perhaps Yuli Yanez, and you were one that were talking about this earlier, that it looked like Dennis mended some fences with Yuli Yanez when he came in. If you remember, he sent him a Galaxy kit. Yanez always talked about he didn't think he got a chance to play for the Galaxy first team. So Dennis, one of the first things he did is send him a first team kit with his name and number on the back. So I think there's been some fence mending going on there. This is a good thing. If Wolfsburg winds up being a place where some of these young players can go and get better competition they can't get from Galaxy 2 and USL. This may all work to the Galaxy's benefit. Dennis certainly thinks it will, and said that it's to their benefit that this player leave the Galaxy Academy and go play well in Germany.
Yeah, which, at least in my mind, if we get to prognosticate there, Kevin, seems like, there's some payments that will be due the LA Galaxy if indeed that is the fact. And we've talked about those solidarity payments, I think, before on podcasts and sort of how lower league teams get paid. And so in this case, the LA Galaxy, were the developers in the academy and the developers of this player, throughout their system. And so they might be due some money if indeed that happens. And we talked about Yanez and scoring for the U.S. men's national team, and I've said, this is always the place where he can come back if he ever decides that he wants to come back to the United States. The LA Galaxy seems like a place where he'd want to go. The same sort of goes for Kobe Hernandez Foster as well. I think the relationship is good enough that if he wanted to come back to LA, if he wanted to come back to the Galaxy, that he could do that, Kevin. And I think that's a success in terms of how the academy has changed and has being managed right now. I think you have to give that a success to the LA Galaxy. I think you have to tip the hat that if there is some financial stuff that comes the LA Galaxy's way, that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of developing those players. Ultimately, you'd like to see them, I think, Kevin, play on the senior team for the LA Galaxy, but there are only 11 starting spots in every single day, and we've seen many times that young talent, it's difficult to break through a lot of times in Major League Soccer, especially. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, and what this is it's a safety valve. It's saying, look, you're a forward. We just signed Chicharito. We got all these guys. The chances of you at 18 getting to play here anytime soon, probably not real good. Hey, you want to go to Germany? That's awesome. We'll try to help make that happen. And what they're telling these players is, look, if you come here, put in good work hard, establish yourself, and there's no spot for you at the Galaxy, or it looks like it may be a while, we'll find a place for you to play. That's all these kids want. I think probably all of them would prefer to stay home at their age as teenagers, stay home and play in front of their family and their parents and friends. But if it's not going to happen here and Germany comes calling and they're offering a lot of money and a chance for advancement and a chance to make a better career, yeah, why not give those kids a chance to go do that? And now there's other kids at the academy going, hey, you know what? I don't think I can make the Galaxy, but maybe I can go play somewhere else. And the Galaxy is going to help me do that. It's all to the good.
Yeah, it seems to be, at least in this case, that those are positives. So we'll talk about Kobe Hernandez Foster. We'll sort of keep an eye on it and see what happens. And then if anything happens, we'll tell you more about it. Before we're done with this particular show, Kevin, we have to get to the LA Galaxy rumors and the rumor around Alan Franco, the 23-year-old center back out of Independiente down in the Argentinian league. This is an ongoing sort of, I guess I'm going to call it a saga. But, it seems like it's coming to a point. I know there's lots of reports saying a deal is done. I'll tell you, as, of course, I usually am the guy who tells you until something's signed, it's not done. And I would certainly say that it doesn't seem like anything has been signed, but there have been multiple levels of agreements, according to at least a couple sources that I've talked to. We talked about on Thursday night, John Rojas, who used to cover the LA Galaxy here on the West Coast, is now on the East Coast, how an excellent job that he's been keeping us informed. So he's been, updating us almost every day, and I've been retweeting that out on Twitter. The problem is there's so many different sources of information coming in about this that it's sort of tough to filter through some of them. So I have been a little quiet on the rumor tracker, just trying to go through this stuff. So we're going to go down a rabbit hole, Kevin. If you're okay with going down a rabbit hole,
yeah, I like rabbits. Oh, by the way, the Galaxy say officially nothing's been done yet, which means something's probably done.
You never know. So let's go down this. What we heard this morning and from last night into this morning, and I know a lot of people saying the deal is done, from last night to this morning, there has actually seemed a strong contingent of the owner from Independiente trying to pull out of this deal. One of the reasons that they thought about pulling out of this deal was that whenever they sold Fadal, who was, I think, another defender, to Miami, they got some money from that. And so all of a sudden the ownership is like, nah, we got money. We're good. We're fine. We don't need to sell Franco as well. But they had already agreed, according to at least one source, they had already agreed to have this deal verbally. And so everybody had already shaken hands, and the coach had basically said, I don't want you to leave, Alan Franco, but if you do leave, that's okay. He goes, I won't stand in your way, basically. I don't want you to go, but if you want to go, I won't stand in your way. And everybody agreed to that. And we saw that Jovan Karofsky from his Instagram post showed that he was down in Argentina. So the timeline's all starting to sort of, come together and understand that. Kevin, the interesting thing is, as I'm told, and again, John Rojas providing a lot of background to me on this because I am not very familiar with Independiente and who they are and where they play and sort of who their ownership is. But Kevin, apparently the owner of this team is actually in charge of the truckers union. And so there have been people upset at the way that he's been running the team, thinking that money from the truckers union is actually going in to running the team. And so they operate this team at a loss and they spend money, and it doesn't matter because the truckers union sort of backing Independiente, which is sort of an interesting little twist to all this. So it sounded like Independiente almost pulled the offer. But I'm told that Franco actually said, wait a minute, we had a deal, we had this verbal deal. I'm not playing if you don't want to do this deal. I'm done. And John Rojas has told me that apparently in South America, that's pretty common for players to pull that.
Yeah, they just say, truck you.
Yeah, that's exactly. I guarantee that it'll get flagged for something, that this podcast will get flagged for something, even though that was perfectly rated G, Kevin. So I appreciate that.
The truckers union.
The truckers union. I got it.
Put that together, yeah.
I got it. Everybody got it. It was perfect. But no, I mean, so this is one of those things that you sort of have to keep an eye on as it is. Now, what I'm told is that stand by Alan Franco seems to have actually worked. The plan right now, although nothing is done, quote unquote, is that Franco would play through the rest of their season, which is basically, it ends on March 8th. So the Galaxy open on February 29th against Houston. I think their home openers on March 7th that following week. So Franco would then play through with Independiente through March 8th. Now, Kevin, I'm about to tell you some numbers and stuff that are more detailed than anything anybody has ever wanted or ever wanted to talk about contracts. And the only reason I'm going to do this is because I want to highlight the lengths that Dennis
complexity.
The complexity, and not only that, but the lengths to which Dennis Teclosa is manipulating the salary cap. And in ways to use that correctly. Now, the offer is apparently $3.5 million for 50%. That values the player at twice the $3.5 million, which is $7 million, right? We all understand that if you get 50% of the player and you pay $3.5 million, that you're saying this player is worth $7 million. Okay, cool. Everybody understands that. Here is the Galaxy apparently are going to pay for this in 4 installments. All right, and take this all with a grain of salt, by the way, but I wanted to highlight this. So apparently the Galaxy will pay in 4 installments. If during the 4 years of the contract, and everybody's sort of reporting it's a 4-year contract, if during that 4 years of the contract, Kevin, the LA Galaxy rejects any offer for $7 million or more, the Galaxy would have to pay Independiente $2.5 million for the other 50% of the rights. So if we add $2.5 million to $3.5 million, we get $6 million, which means that Independiente is actually okay with valuing the player at $6 million, which is sort of the numbers that we said made a whole bunch of sense. So the $3.5 million times 2 says $7 million, but the buyout of the other 50% is actually $2.5 million, which is $6 million, okay? Again, complexity is there. If the player is sold, if the LA Galaxy sell Franco, then they split that money 50-50 because it's 50% of a stake, okay? If after 4 years the Galaxy want to extend the contract, they pay $2.5 million again. All right. So there's a penalty in here, in terms of the initial investment by the LA Galaxy at $3.5 million, but the overall cost of the player, if they ever wanted to buy the 50% of the rights, seems to be at the $6 million range. So that's not so far outside of the realm of possibility. But all of this goes to show you that Dennis Acosta is trying to sign a center back who is worth between $6 and $7 million and not have him be a designated player. And that is an excellent way to get players on your team to manipulate that salary cap. Did anybody fall asleep on that?
You lost me when you said we're going to talk about a lot of numbers. That was the last part I understood. But I will tell you that Dennis and I talked about this on the phone on Friday. We talked about Franco and contracts and all that. And he did say that he was trying to get Franco. He said they've been scouting him for a long time, that they really like him and somebody that they really want. But he also talked about how last year they signed, if you remember, they had Antuna and Fabio Alvarez that came here on loans. And he said loans are great for short term. You can get a guy in. You don't have to pay the DP stuff. You don't have to pay transfer fees. You can get him in. He said, but you have no control over them. It's a very short term thing. And Dennis said, we are trying to build a long-term roster. We're trying to find long-term solutions. We don't want to be doing this every year. And so when you look at what he did with Cristian Pavon, he kind of got him in under a loan, and then the Galaxy were able to take over his contract, or had the option to. And that's what this sounds like. It's almost a loan, but it's not a loan, because the Galaxy are taking some financial responsibility and risk here. And the idea that it's a 4-year contract again says to Dennis, as Dennis has said, we want some long-term projections here. We want to know what we have going forward. So the way that they're manipulating the system, if you want to use that term, it looks like a loan, but it's not a loan, because the Galaxy, have some options going forward. They don't have to give the player back. It looks good all the way around. But one thing that Dennis did say is that a lot of times you have to be patient. He said, if this is a guy that we really want and we have to wait until mid-March or early April to get him, we're going to wait, because it's a guy we want him 4 years from now. We don't want him 4 months from now. So we're not going to give up on this guy and sign another guy just because he's available and have that guy be a bust. This is the guy that we've identified. This is the guy that we want. We're going to wait for him. And then he further added the same thing that you were talking about, is a lot of times a team is willing to give somebody up, but they're in their own tournament, as Independiente is right now. They have their own games, and the transfer windows around the world are closed. Right. And so they can't get a replacement. This is a guy who is a first-team center back for a very important team in Argentina, and they can't replace him. So they're not going to give this guy up to help Dennis. Dennis may be a nice guy and they love him. They're not going to give him up to help them and then lose their last 6 games of the season or whatever it is, because they don't have a suitable replacement. So Dennis, was making the point that it is a delicate balancing act. You can't just think about your own needs. You have to think through the other team's eyes too, and say, what can I do to help you solve your situation so we can all move forward here? But it does sound like the Dennis has played this one well. I don't know that he's quite in the Bruce Arena school yet of manipulating all these MLS rules, but seems to be moving in that direction, doesn't he?
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. So we'll see if any of that pans out and actually is true. Again, a lot of that stuff could be fudged one way or the other.
Could you go over all that number stuff again?
No, we're done. No, we're done. But we do have some breaking news, at least some breaking pod. Yeah, this is not a good one for LA Galaxy fans. We talked about Dani Acosta coming out of the game, Kevin. We talked about him looking fairly injured. You even said that the injury looked
really bad.
Yep, Dani Acosta just posted on Instagram. He says, "Today I received bad news that I wouldn't wish upon anyone. I'm disappointed to say that I suffered an ACL injury this past weekend and will be missing out on the sport I love the most. Everything happens for a reason, but I will come back even stronger than ever. So Dani Acosta certainly seems like he could be out for the season for the LA Galaxy with an ACL injury, certainly out for an extended period of time for that. And that was the depth at left back that looked so much better with Emiliano Insua supposed to be the starter there. Dani Acosta, Danilo Acosta coming in and being that depth there, and now he's out for a considerable amount of time right now.
Well, and think about him, too. Think about the player. Here's a guy who came to the Galaxy, was definitely going to get some playing time, was somebody that they looked at as being very important. Getting a chance he didn't get really in other places, it's got to be devastating to his career. At the place where he is right now, he really can't afford to be on the shelf for another year. And the Galaxy are going to move forward. They're going to replace him. And when he comes back next year, that's one more person he has to climb over to get his job back.
Yeah, it's a tough blow. I really liked seeing him and the way he played. I thought he was more than serviceable and a good depth piece. That looks like that's end.
But remember, he went down early in the first half. He went down the second time. That knee was already wrapped. It had one of those elastic bandages on it above the knee and down to the knee. So there was some weakness there already. Whether this had anything to do with that, I mean, it certainly looks like that's probable. But it when he went down and the way he was reacting, the fact that the knee was already wrapped, it just didn't look good from the start.
Yeah, I think they wrapped it after the first injury, and so whatever it was, like you said, that was not a good deal. And I don't know. It is. I don't necessarily like to raise these questions, Kevin, but I think you have to raise the question. Right now, I tend to be pretty dismissive of this particular train of thought. But in my mind, you have to ask the question of, is Valdecantos, is Javier Valdecantos putting too much pressure on these guys in preseason? I mean, we've seen a lot of injuries. We know Steres is not 100%. We know Emiliano Insua is not 100%. Jonathan Dos Santos is not 100%. There's a possibility that Rolf Feltscher is not 100%. You get a Dani Acosta now who has a severe injury and is out. It's always a question. Again, I tend to dismiss it. I usually say these things happen.
I don't. I think there's a definite connection. We didn't see these. I mean, look at Ramon Alessandrini. I mean, he was a workhorse his first year and a half, and then all of a sudden he misses almost the entire season last year with injuries. Injuries. Yeah,
but he was injured even whenever he came from Marseille. He had a history of knee injuries and different problems. So you can't say that originated with the LA Galaxy.
No, but I don't think it was helped.
Well, I mean, but also playing on a knee that has already been repaired multiple times is also not helping at any point. So again, you can bring up the Alessandrini. To me, doesn't prove that point. I will say that, I remember when Kurt Arnolfo came in, Kevin, and I talked to the players, and the players were talking about how rough his preseason was. And I don't think that even paled in comparison to what it was. I think these guys are being pressed. I think they're being pressed really hard. I think that part of Javier Valdecantos and what he does is to break these guys down in the preseason, and is to really, get their bodies on the edge. And I think it's easy to go over that edge. I don't know that there's any blame that you can point there, but certainly whenever you see these types of injuries, and just even the little nagging injuries that players get, you wonder if it's doing more good than bad. And
a couple of things. Last year, he talked about how today's players are not like the players of yesteryear. He's 70 something when he started. He started doing this a long time ago, and he's adapted. He'll talk a good game about some of the new methods and some of the electronic gadgets he has and some ways of measuring and monitoring people. And he's definitely fluent in that kind of stuff. But he also did talk a lot about the players' personalities and how they were hungrier back in the day and they were tougher players back in the day. I don't know whether all that's true. But when I hear that, my first thought is, he's kind of got a message that he wants to deliver, and you wonder if he's punishing some of these guys just to prove they're not as tough as the guys in the old days. Look, these guys run a 10K, every time they play a game, most of them. So he's training them to run a 10K, but it's not a 10K. It's not a race. It's a soccer game, and there are other things that they need to do. I'm just not convinced that, I want these guys to be fit too. And I think in the past we have seen guys that weren't fit. But just because you can run a 10K in under 30 minutes doesn't mean you're a good soccer player.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's just interesting. Again, it's something we'll have to watch. But Dani Acosta out for the foreseeable future, and the depth at left back, it's a little bit less deep I guess you could say. I was going to say less depthy.
It's shallower.
It's shallower.
You do the numbers, I'll do the words, okay?
That's probably a good idea. Didi Traore is a possible backup there, but again, we talked about the international slot and the ability, and having he's currently counted on the 8 of 8 slots. So moving him down or keeping him there doesn't kill anything, especially if Rolf Feltscher gets it and then you bring in an Alan Franco. It's then 8 of 8 again, and everybody's roster compliant. But Didi Traore is the backup there, and apparently he was not 100% either, if I remember, because I asked where Traore was for the scrimmage, and that's what I was told as well. So, hey, listen, that's normal in preseason. I would expect that there to be little knocks, little stuff that's bothering people. It's whenever it develops into these larger things like Dani Acosta. And I'd point out, Paul Arriola over at DC United didn't have anything to do with Javier Valdecantos this year, and he tore, I believe, partially torn ACL for DC United, and will miss a good portion of the year for them as well. So, it happens. These things happen, and these injuries happen. I just think the LA Galaxy fans are starting to feel like they're happening a lot more often than they were in the past. So, again, something to keep an eye on, and we'll give you any updates on any of the injuries whenever we can. I think that about does it, Kevin. I think we're good, right?
Well, we're better than Daniel Acosta, unfortunately for him.
Yeah, that's not a fun way to end the show. I will tell you this: we will have a live show coming up on Thursday. I believe Sophie DeCann and Nicolau in studio for Eric the Portuguese Hammer, who is still out. I think he's doing parenting things. How dare he? You're supposed to just ignore your children like I do. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. But no, so
maybe Valdecantos has him doing stuff with his kids.
Very well,
running or something.
Wind sprints up and down the bleachers. So anyway, Sophie will be in on Thursday, and then again live show on Saturday, 2:22, 1:45 p.m. at the KINECTA Plaza there on the backside southeast part of the stadium. Get your tickets, get there at 1. We'll see you at 1. Live show starts around 1:45, and we'll continue basically up until they make us stop, because there's going to be a kickoff for the LA Galaxy.
Yeah, we come at 1 o'clock. We want to see you all. Valdecantos will be out there putting all of us through our paces. We're going to be doing wind sprints and all kinds of exercises, and you'll really want to see that.
Yep. Bring your running shoes, right? That's what you should do.
That's it.
That's how it is. All right. Okay, I think that about does it then. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter, you can find him at KBaxter11, and of course over at LATimes.com, where all of Kevin's wonderful articles are posted. So check out Kevin as he covers soccer in Southern California and around the United States. If you're looking for me on Twitter, it's at JGuesman, JGUESMAN, and of course at Galaxy Podcast. CorneroftheGalaxy.com. We had a great recap video from Dignity Health Sports Park with the Hammer and I, so check that out on our YouTube page. Subscribe on our YouTube page, like our YouTube page, write reviews on all of our podcasts. Go on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. If you give us a really good one and it's funny, I'll read it on the air. Why not? We can do that. We can steal what other people do and do that on here. I'll do that, no problem. So anyway, I think that about does it for Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter. I'm Josh Patrick Guesman. You've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on CorneroftheGalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on CorneroftheGalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast, and be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.